What's up, guys? It's Eric from Rare Candy coming at you today with a brand new video series here on PTCGO. If any of you guys saw our merch announcement video we previously did, we mentioned it that we're going to have two new types of video series we're going to be doing on PTCGO. One is the Battle on a Budget series that we started already, and for the second new type of video that we're doing, it's going to be a series called Tech It Out. And basically, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at different popular archetypes, and we're going to look at maybe two or three different versions of the deck, but with several cards being changed just to be able to adapt to different types of metas and just different ways you can play the deck. So that's what we have here. And for the very first episode of this, we're going to take a look at Trevenant BREAK. This is a card that has, I think, a decent amount of flexibility in terms of how you can build a list around it. So for you guys who aren't familiar with Trevenant BREAK, it evolves from the XY Trevenant, which has the Force Curse ability, which locks your opponent's items cards, as long as Trevenant is your active Pokemon, of course. But with Breakpoint, when that came out, the deck really got a huge boost and kind of came into its own with the Trevenant BREAK. It boosts the XY Trevenant's hit points all the way up to 160 while still locking your opponent's item cards, and it gains a new spread attack called Silent Fear. And it's very easy to use, just one psychic energy if you play Dimension Valley. So Trevenant's become a very, very strong force in the current metagame. So we're going to look at a couple different ways that you can build a deck around Trevenant BREAK. So for the first one, we're going to take a look at Trevenant with Bursting Balloons. This is probably the most popular way we've seen this type of deck built. So let's go ahead and take a look at what a list might look like with the Bursting Balloons that we're talking about. Alright guys, so if you've played against a Trevenant BREAK deck before, chances are it probably looks something kind of along these lines. Since the Burst Balloon version of Trevenant is definitely the most popular that we've seen so far. So let's just start with the Pokemon line and show what we're going to be playing in this version. So it is important to note that this is the Phantom you will want to use in all of these different Trevenant BREAK lists, since it has the Ascension attack. So for example, if you go second, and you don't have Wally to just immediately evolve into Trevenant, you can attach an energy or just place down Dimension Valley and attack for free to use Ascension and evolve straight into Trevenant right on your first turn of the game. So this is definitely the Phantom we want to use. The other one does have a little bit more hit points, but the attack is well worth it here. And so since Trevenant BREAK does evolve from the XY Trevenant, we do need to go over his stats. So 110 hit points, has the Force Curse ability. As long as Trevenant is your active Pokemon, your opponent can't play item cards from his or her hand. So this guy is what makes the whole deck work. We always kind of want to be attacking with Trevenant and have him in the active spot. So, and he also has the attack Tree Slam. For a Psychic and double colorless, it does 60 and 20 to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So in most cases, we do want to be using Silent Fear, the attack on the break, but Tree Slam is still nifty just because it can help you take certain knockouts that Silent Fear won't let you do. So it's still an attack that we're going to use once in a while. And like we've been talking about, we have the Trevenant BREAK card. It basically just boosts our Trevenant's hit points all the way up to 160, which is really nice for just a non-EX. And then has the attack Silent Fear for a Psychic and a colorless, or in the case of this deck, usually just a Psychic energy since we play Dimension Valley. You put 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. So like we're saying, we're going to be spreading damage throughout the course of the game while we're item locking our opponents. So, that's the bulk of the Pokemon in this list, but we are also playing one Wobbuffet. This is kind of our backup attacker in the deck. So it has 110 hit points, very nice for a non-EX basic. And it has, most importantly, this Bide Barricade ability. This ability is so strong and has a lot of benefits to it. So basically, Wobbuffet shuts off all abilities other than Psychic Pokemon as long as he is your active. So this really helps out against a couple different decks. And expand it, it shuts off archetypes. That way you can evolve your Pokemon. In standard format, we have, Vileplume variants running around. So if you get turn 1 item locked, if you can potentially get down a Wobbuffet and promote him to your active Pokemon, you can actually shut off item lock and get back in the game. Because especially like Vespiquen Vileplume variants, they're so reliant on getting that turn 1 item lock. And if you can break that, it kind of that doesn't make all of the hard work they do on their first turn void, but it will buy you, a turn or two to kind of set your board up and play out a lot of these item cards that you would typically have clogging your hands. So I think that's a very, very important matchup um, to be able to have a counter for. Because typically against Trevenant versus the Vileplume variants, it's usually, unfortunately, whoever wins the coin flip, in my experience, will win the game. Because whoever gets the first turn item lock is just in such a huge advantageous position after that. So, if you go second and they get their first turn item lock, you can promote that Wobbuffet at some point. It will let you get back in the game, I think. And then also I think the other deck it really helps against is Greninja. To be honest, I think Trevenant has a great Greninja matchup regardless. But, let's say you Silent Fear for a couple turns and spread some damage. After that, if you promote Wobbuffet, you can just kind of clean up the rest of their board because they won't be able to use their abilities that they're so reliant on to do damage. So Wobbuffet is just a really nice card that has a lot of uses, and the attack is decent too. So it has Psychic Assault for a Psychic and a Colorless, 10 damage, plus 10 more for each damage counter already on your opponent's active Pokemon. So like we said, Trevenant really doesn't take big one-hit knockouts. It kind of just spreads damage slowly over the course of the game. So towards the end, you can throw down Wobbuffet and a Psychic Energy and start cleaning up some of these knockouts that Trevenant has set up for you. So it's a really nice card. I know some people opt to play 2, but I'm only playing 1 just because I found that every time I ever start with this card, it's always a big inconvenience. Like, yes, sometimes my opponent can't play Shaman because of this ability, but more often than not, I just feel frustrated when I have to start with this guy. So we're just playing 1 just to kind of limit our chances of starting with it. And then the only other Pokemon we're going to be playing in this list is going to be 3 Shaman EX. So in expanded format, I really like the split of 2 Shaman EX, 1 Jirachi EX. But unfortunately in standard format, we don't have access to Jirachi EX. So I opted just to bump the count up to 3. So, I really do like that. It just kind of ensures that we get the turn 1 Wally if we go first. So that, because if you prize 2 Shamans when, if you only play 2, that really hurts. Or, I mean, even if you just prize 1, a lot of times that really hurts in terms of, getting your board set up and getting that turn 1 item lock that you're so reliant on getting. So that's why we're playing 3 of those guys. And onto the trainer cards. I think I'll start with the supporters. And since this is updated for Fates Collide, we do have N back in the format, thankfully. And this is a card we're playing 3 of. And a lot of decks might opt for 2, but I like 3 in this list because, Trevenant, like we've been saying, it doesn't really take one-hit knockouts. It kind of slowly builds up damage over the course of the game. And so in most cases, we are normally going to be the ones who go down on prize cards first. So N is really good because even if we lose, a Trevenant or 2 while we're setting up, we can kind of end our opponent and disrupt their hand a little bit to let us get back in the game. So we're playing 3 of these. And also it's really handy in case your opponent tries to, do the whole Shaman Sky Return loop on you by, just Sky Returning it until your Trevenants get knocked out. Since we play all these ends, we can just end our opponent and put those Shamans back in their deck, and hopefully that'll buy us a turn that they won't be able to Sky Return. So end's a great card, really happy this is back in the format, and helps some of these slower, more defensive decks like Trevenant. So the other probably key card of the supporters is going to be Wally, like we've been talking about. So we're playing 2 of this guy, and it lets you search your deck for a Pokemon that evolves from one of your Pokemon and evolve into it immediately. So you can even do this on the first turn, and that's what makes Trevenant so strong. So we're only going to be playing 2 of these. I've seen some lists that play 3 and even 4, but to be honest, I really don't like that. They tend to clog your hand in the late game. And yeah, even though you're going to get the turn 1 Wally more often in this type of list, probably, um, I just feel like your late game just suffers a lot for it. So we're only playing 2, and since we're playing the 3 Shaman, that's another reason I'm not really worried about it, just because we have more outs into drawing into Wally in this type of list. So that's why we're only playing 2 of them. You can bump it up to 3 if you really, really want to, but in my testing, I've always just preferred 2. It's worked out just fine. So we're also playing 1 Lysander. A lot of lists typically run 2, but since we're a spread-based deck, a lot of our knockouts are going to be taken just from spreading damage. We're not as reliant on Lysandering to take knockouts as opposed to, other types of decks. So that's why we're only playing 1. And Lysander is also really, really handy against certain matchups. Bronzong is a really good example where you can Lysander, like a Bronzong off their bench, or maybe like an Aegislash EX. A Pokemon that has a really high retreat cost, and you can just kind of strand it in the active spot and spread damage around it. And since your opponent's item locked, they can't play things like Floatstone or Escape Rope to get out of the active spot. And you can potentially just clean up their whole board just doing that. So Lysander is still a good card. I think at least 1 is necessary. And then the last of our supporters is going to be kind of an interesting, unorthodox card choice, I think. And that's going to be 1 Pokemon Fan Club. So you get to search your deck for up to 2 basic Pokemon, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So this isn't a card I've seen a lot, but this actually was a card I ran in my list at North Carolina State's, which got me 9th. So, not the greatest accomplishment, but still, I bubbled out of Top Cut. But this card actually did come in handy a lot of the games that I played. So for some reason, if like I whiffed the turn 1 Wally or something, I might have access to this. And you can grab like a Phantom and then also a Shaman to keep drawing cards. I felt like it was actually more handy in the late game because after a couple Trevenants get knocked out, I can Sacred Ash them back into the deck and then use Fan Club just to get, a couple of Phantoms back on the board. So I also really like it under item lock as well. It gives you an out to just grab your Wobbuffet. So like we were talking about, if we're playing against a Bioplume variant, it's really important that we get our Wobbuffet on the board as quickly as possible. That way we can, break that item lock and start setting up and using our item cards again. So I found that it was really, really good under item lock and in the late game especially. Like I said, after a couple Trevenants get knocked out, you can just Sacred Ash, and instead of having to Sycamore or something and hope you get what you need, it was nice having the option just to get the guaranteed 2 basics. And some people might be tempted to play Bridget if they are going to play a card like this, but I loved Fan Club, like I said, because we can not only grab a Phantom, but we can also get a Shaman with it too. So that's really important. So, like I said, it is a bit of an unusual card choice. So if there is something you do prefer, maybe like a Zerosic or, a 4th Sycamore or 3rd Wally, something to that effect, I understand if you want to cut this, but like I said, it did well for me at the tournament I took it to, so that's why I opted to include it in this list as well. And then we're just playing 4 VS Seeker or Versus Seeker just to reuse our supporters. Let's see, for our stadium cards, we're playing 3 Dimension Valley. And most of these Trevenant decks do run 4, so 3 might seem a little unusual at first glance, but here's the thing, there's so many decks that play Dimension Valley right now. I'd say half the time your opponent's just going to play it down for you. So we have Night March, which typically plays 3 or 4 Dimension Valley, Trevenant, which plays 3 or 4 Dimension Valley, Mega Alakazam, that looks to be a deck that might be popular going into the Fates Collide format. Some variants of that use Dimension Valley, and then there's so many different Mew decks that I've been seeing people test with, which all run Dimension Valley. So there's just so many different decks that use this card right now, I don't think 4 is really necessary in this format. But like I said, it is an unusual count. So if you do want to play 4 and you find something in this list you don't like, feel free to cut it and play around with a fourth one instead. But like I was saying, I think going into the Fates Collide format, there's going to be enough decks already playing this to where you don't need to max it out. But so that might just be a little bit of theory mine, but I feel like that's probably the right play. And so for our item cards, let's just go straight into talking about Burst Balloon. This is kind of the main card of the deck that we're going to talk about. So Bursting Balloon, it is an item card, Pokemon tool, and you attach it to one of your Pokemon. And whenever your opponent attacks into the Pokemon that has Burst Balloon attached to it, they take 6 damage counters. So it's kind of like Rock Guard, but the only downside is this card gets discarded at the end of your opponent's next turn, no matter what. So sometimes your opponent can opt to, not attack you, which is fine because Trevenant's a slow deck. And if they don't want to attack you, that's fine. That's just more damage you get in the spread. So more often than not, they do attack in you because they really want to knock out your Trevenants and turn off that item lock that's shutting off all of, like half of their deck. So Burst Moon is such a good card, and it's a really key card into beating some of this deck's unfavorable matchups, mainly Yveltal EX. That's a big one. So I remember before the Breakpoint, all of the Breakpoint tournaments started happening, like states and everything. Marcus and myself were testing this deck, and we tried so many different things to try to deal with Yveltal. We tried Raichu, we tried Hammers, we tried even Meowstic, but nothing really did the trick until we started using Burst Balloon. And so, like we keep saying, Trevenant really doesn't take knockouts easily. It's reliant on, slowly building up damage throughout the course of the game. But if your Trevenants keep getting one-shotted, it's hard to really take knockouts. And having this extra 60 free damage every turn is so nice and really helps against Yveltal. Helps with Zoroark, Vespiquen, Night March. It just really helps with your numbers against so many different things. So I love this card. We're going to max this out at 4, definitely, for sure. And it's kind of what makes the deck tick. So, and while we're talking about our tool cards, we'll just cover the rest of them. We're playing 1 Floatstone. This is more or less just for Wobbuffet. You can also play it down on Shamans just to give yourself a nice free retreater whenever, a Trevenant goes down. So, but like I said, it's mainly for Wobbuffet just because he has that pesky 2 retreat cost. So, but you can also use it for other things. Like if you have a Trevenant that's about to get knocked out, you can attach it to it and free retreat into a fresh one. But so you get the idea. And we're also playing 1 Headringer. This might seem like a really odd number to play. A lot of decks typically play either 2 in their list or none at all. But we're playing 1 just because it is a good card. It's very important for stopping that Shaman loop that I talked about, where your opponent can just keep using Sky Return until your Trevenants are knocked out. It's really good against things like Seismitoad EX, Yveltal EX, just pretty much any EX. So it's a tool card. In case you guys didn't know, you get to attach to one of your opponent's EX, and they have to pay 1 more energy to attack you. So, we've said this a million times at this point, but, Trevenant is a slow attacker. So anything like this that buys you an extra turn to keep attacking before your opponent gets set up really helps. And so, yeah, it just helps in a variety of different situations. And even though we're only playing 1 Headringer, we are playing 1 Eco Arm. So a lot of decks, Trevenant decks, usually also play 2 Floatstone as well. And I think the way we can get away with playing 1 Floatstone and 1 Headringer is by playing this Eco Arm. So it lets you shuffle 3 tool cards from your discard into your deck. So that's really nice because we can reuse our Headringers, our Floatstone, and also most importantly, we can reuse our Burst Balloons. With this card, you can effectively have 7 Burst Balloons in the course of a game, and that is great. That's a lot of extra free damage. So I really like this Eco Arm card a lot. And since we're playing it, like I said, I feel like we can get away with playing only 1 Floatstone and 1 Headringer. So the other recovery card that we're going to be playing is Sacred Ash. And, this is a little bit of an unusual choice, I think. A lot of Trevenant decks typically favor Super Rod, but yeah, Super Rod, I don't know. I always felt like I wasn't getting enough back with it. With Sacred Ash, you can get an entire Trevenant Break evolution line and another Trevenant evolution line. Whereas just with Super Rod, you're probably going to get like an Energy and, a Trevenant and Phantom. So in my testing, I didn't really feel like I ever ran out of energy. There may have only been one or two games where I really, really was cutting it close in terms of, running out of energy. So that's why I felt like the Super Rod wasn't necessary. I just opted for Sacred Ash. But so yeah, if you play a lower energy account than this list, I might switch over to Super Rod, but for the amount of energy we have, I prefer Sacred Ash in this list. Okay. Then a lot of our things are kind of standard. 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Trainer's Mail, and 1 Level Ball, just to help draw into the things that we need. Startling Megaphone. We are playing one of these as well. This is kind of a interesting card in the list. So discard all Pokemon tool cards attached to each of your opponent's Pokemon. So unfortunately, you can't go first every single game. It's just how it works out. Unless you're just really good at flipping coins or something, you're going to have to go second sometimes. And a lot of decks, if they know they're playing against Trevenant, they're really going to try to dig through their deck and play as many item cards as they can. So things like Night March are really trying to hit like those Fighting Fury belts that they need to put down before they get item locked. So, and even like mega decks like Rayquaza and Manectric and, Alakazam going into the Fates Collide format, they're going to try to get down all these tool cards as quickly as they can. So I like Megaphone just because if you go second, you will be able to still, Megaphone and get rid of those cards that they get down. So I really like this card. It's done great in my testing. If you do want to switch this over to Xerosic, I don't think that's a bad idea either. I just opted for Megaphone. And I don't know, it did the job from what I could tell. Okay, and for the last of our trainer cards, we just have 1 Battle Compressor. So search your deck for up to 3 cards and discard them. So we play 4 Versus Seeker, so playing Compressor just gives us more outs to hitting the turn 1 Wally. And also in certain matchups, we can discard cards that we don't need, like we can discard Head Ringers against non-EX decks, or maybe Wobbuffet if it's a dead card. We can just get rid of stuff that we aren't going to use. So very, very handy. Okay, and so onto the energy count, and this admittedly is a little bit of a different count than a lot of Trevenant decks played. I basically based this whole list off the list that I took to North Carolina States and just kind of edited it to, fit for the Fates Collide format. But this is the same energy count I played as well. So we have 5 Psychic Energy, because all our attackers are Psychic, 2 Mystery Energy. This is really handy, especially if we have to start with Wobbuffet. So it's a special energy for Psychic Pokemon that reduces their retreat cost by 2. So it's nice because you can free retreat your Wobbuffet if you have to start with it. If a Trevenant is starting to get damaged and you want to switch to a fresh one without discarding a bunch of energy, you can just attach a Mystery Energy. So it just fits in with this type of deck since a lot of our Pokemon have hefty retreat costs. And then for the last card in the list, we have 2 Double Colorless Energy. And since we're playing 3 Dimension Valley, I felt like this is a card that, it wouldn't hurt to play. Just because we aren't going to be consistently as drawing Dimension Valley as if we were playing 4. So I wanted to give us the extra out to making sure we would be able to Tree Slam when we need to. It's another way to retreat Wobbuffet with only 1 attachment. And also in the mirror, it's very handy because we can actually Sky Return our opponent. We can just do the whole Sky Return loop to knock out all their Trevenants. And since Burst Balloon doesn't knock out your Shamans, you can just keep this loop going the whole time. It's a little tedious to do, but like I said, it gives us that option in the mirror. And I don't think most Trevenant decks run DCE. So, like I said, I think it's a very good in those types of situations. So, yeah, guys, that is the bursting balloon list. Like I said, is probably the most standard type of Trevenant variant that you're going to run into. But we still have two more other versions of the deck we're going to talk about, and we'll get to those next, okay? All right, so for the next type of Trevenant deck we're going to look at, it's going to be more of a disruption-based variant. So it's going to be reliant on things like crushing hammers and all sorts of different energy denial cards. That's really what we're going to be going for in this type of list. So for the Pokemon line in this type of deck, it's pretty much all the same. We're only going to play 2 Shaman, which is still fine. I think that's the standard count for this type of deck. But the odd type of inclusion that we have is actually going to be a different type of Trevenant. So this is the new Trevenant that came out in Breakpoint, and it has the Nervous Seed ability. As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, the attacks of your opponent's basic Pokemon cost 1 colorless more. So that's kind of like Headringer in a way. And we do play Headringer in this list as well. So you're going to be forcing your opponent to have a lot of energy in play in order to attack you. Assuming they have basic Pokemon, of course. And then its attack is Energy Press for a Psychic and double colorless. It does 70 plus 10 more for each energy on your opponent's active Pokemon. So there's a couple reasons we're going to be playing this. The first reason is it actually kind of prevents your opponent from doing the Sky Return loop on you. We just talked about that in the Bursting Balloon variant of Trevenant. It's a popular tactic people like to do against Trevenant, especially if their deck has a tough matchup. They can kind of forego their normal strategy and just resort to Sky Returning until they take knockouts on your Trevenants. So by playing this and also Headringer, we make it so that your opponent needs multiple attachments on a Shaman in order to use Sky Return. And it kind of takes that strategy out of the, it kind of eliminates that as an option for them. And not to mention that we don't play Bursting Balloon in this list. Like I said, it is more focused on disruption cards. So this deck does have a pretty bad dark matchup without Bursting Balloons, I think. It's really hard, I think, for Trevenant to win, unless your opponent just opens all item cards and, you item lock them first turn. So I think Energy Press is a really good attack to use against things like Yveltal, because typically your Trevenants wouldn't do that much damage otherwise, but with this one, you can easily hit for 90, 100 damage, which 2 shots in Yveltal. So I think it's basically just another cleanup attacker and helps offset the lack of damage output that we had from Bursting Balloon. If you guys want to cut this and go up to just 4 item lock Trevenants, that's totally fine too. I just think this one kind of goes along with the theme of this type of deck, and if nothing else, it's a cute inclusion. I'll say that. So that's really the only differences in our Pokemon line, and most of the supporters are the same from the previous list, but we do have a couple changes. We have cut Fan Club altogether, and we're playing some energy disruption cards. So the first one is going to be Team Flare Gun. Discard an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So, if item lock wasn't already annoying enough, now you can item lock and discard your opponent's energy too. So it's especially good because, like we've talked about, Trevenant doesn't really take knockouts easily. It takes several turns before you build up enough damage to kind of cash in and take a couple knockouts. So things like this Team Flare Grunt and these other energy denial cards, it really helps slow your opponent down and keep them at your pace. That way, they don't jump ahead in terms of the prize trade. So we're going to play just one of these, but that's fine because we can keep reusing it with Versus Seeker. And also we're playing 1 Xerosic. So you can discard a Pokemon tool or a special energy attached to a Pokemon in play. So that's super good. Most decks right now are reliant on special energy. Things like Night March and Vespiquen Vileplume, and even like Toad Giratina, they are completely reliant on special energy. So you can really abuse this card throughout the course of a game. But again, going forward, it will be we will have Fates Collide in the format, so it's hard to say what the meta is going to be. So, but I'm just basing all this off of what we had in Breakpoint, what the metagame was then. So, great card for it, and also you can get rid of things like Fighting Fury Belts, because if people get those down, that can be very problematic because Trevenant already has a hard time cleaning up knockouts. But if they get another 40 hit points, that's very, very tough, especially in like dark decks too. So Xerosic is just a card that has a couple different utilities that really help out Trevenant. Okay, and for our stadium cards, we actually did opt to bump this up to 4-Dimension Valley. And since we did, we actually cut double colorless energy entirely and just opted to play one more psychic energy. So since we are playing one less energy as well, I did opt to change Sacred Ash to Super Odd in this deck. So like we talked about, Super Odd, you can shuffle any 3 Pokemon and energy back into your deck. Like I said, I preferred Sacred Ash in the other version of the deck. You're welcome to try that out in here as well, but like I said, since we're playing one less energy, I felt like maybe having the option to get energy back might be beneficial here. Okay. And the other couple cards that are going to be different are going to be Crushing Hammer. So like we were saying, this is an energy denial deck. It's one of these disruption cards that we have. So just flip a coin. If heads, discard an energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So like we've been saying, Trevenant is a very slow attacker, and just playing all these Crushing Hammers can really put your opponent, kind of out of the game. And especially in decks like Night March that we keep talking about, they are very reliant on things like Puzzles of Time to reuse their double colorless energies that they have. So if we can discard all of their energies and their item locked, it'll be hard for them to kind of come back and win sometimes. So it is a flip card, so half the time we are going to hit tails. So that's why we're just going to max these out and play 4 of these. And then the other card that wasn't in the last list is going to be one weakness policy. So Pokemon this card is attached to has no weakness. So like we said, this deck's dark matchup is bad. Like it's bad without bursting balloons. So weakness policy is just kind of a tech card just to help assist us between the weakness policy, all of the energy denial cards that we're playing. We should have enough different outs in order to make the dark matchup actually winnable again. So it's just another card that helps with that. And Zoroark is also a really popular card too. Like it's in a bunch of decks that aren't even just dark decks. Bronzong has played Zoroark before. I've played against Vespiquen variants that have played Zoroark in them as well. So it's just a popular card that could be seen in a lot of different decks. And if they get a Zoroark going pretty fast before you get set up, they can potentially just overrun you. But weakness policy can kind of help with that a little bit too. So guys, other than that, that is the deck. I haven't tested this version as much as the Burst Balloon variant, but I think it does have a lot of strengths for it. Energy Disruption is really big, but I'm not as big of a fan of coin flip decks. I try to avoid them if possible, but nevertheless, this is a really strong version. I forget, I think it did top I want to say it was like some sort of big tournament in the UK not terribly long ago. I could be wrong. I do know it topped something big not too long ago, though. Not this exact list or anything, but this type of version of Trevenant. So it definitely has a lot going for it as well. It's just a different way to play it. So yeah, guys, that is the energy disruption or denial version of Trevenant as well. All right, guys, so for the last Trevenant deck that we're going to take a look at, it's actually a new version that's only possible because of the new Fates Collide set that came out. So for this one, it's actually going to be a Trevenant BREAK Mega Alakazam deck. And to be honest, this is a deck I thought would be very, very clunky. I kind of saw the synergy between Trevenant and Alakazam, but I just assumed it would be too clunky and didn't really bother testing it out. So I initially kind of dismissed this deck, but recently a fellow PokeTuber, The Tuff Puff, a great channel, be sure to check those guys out. They put out really good content. They posted a deck profile for this, and it kind of inspired me to tinker around with it and, try it out. So I think I changed maybe 2, maybe 3 cards max from their list and started playing with this on PTCGO, and it's actually been working a lot better than I anticipated it to. So a lot of this will look very familiar if you've been, looking at this past list we just posted, in the previous portion of the video. So let's check out Mega Alakazam and see what the big deal is about. So for the first regular Alakazam, it has the ability Kinesis. Whenever you play Mega Alakazam from your hand to evolve him, you get to put 2 damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon and 3 damage counters on one of their benched. So you can already see how that has synergy with Trevenant, the whole spread damage thing. But then we have, and it does have an attack as well. Suppression, 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon that has energy. But really, we want to take a look at Mega Alakazam. So it has the attack Zen Force, does 10 plus 30 for every damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So that's kind of like the Wobbuffet that we featured in all of these lists, but a lot stronger. So let's just do the math real quick. If you get a Trevenant BREAK into play, and you do Silent Fear to spread 3 damage counters to all of your opponent's Pokemon, and you evolve into Mega Alakazam, that puts another 2 on the active. So, and then you do Zen Force, that's a lot of damage. So if their active Pokemon has 5 damage counters, so 5 times 30, 150. So it'll do 160 damage total from Zen Force, and that's just the damage Zen Force is doing. That's not counting the damage that's already on them. So you can, that's 210 damage total. That knocks out Megas, that knocks out Fighting Fury Belted EXs, regular EXs. So it's a very, very strong cleanup attack. And that's one thing Trevenant really needs. You've heard us talk about throughout the course of this video, Trevenant is just not a very efficient attacker. It relies very much on your opponent being slowed down by your item lock, and that will let you spread enough damage to be able to take some knockouts. So Mega Alakazams are really nice, especially against things like Yveltal EX and things like Mega Manectric, attackers that typically give Trevenant a hard time. So it's a very, very good card that helps, offset some of those bad matchups. And, Trevenant, like I said, it just needed a very good cleanup attacker, and Mega Alakazam definitely does the job in that respect. So, other than that, like I said, a lot of this will look similar. We did find space for 2 bursting balloons. We already talked about this in the first variant that we showed. So, it has synergy not only with Trevenant and Wobbuffet, but also with Mega Alakazam as well. So even if you just throw a bursting balloon down and you don't even get off a Tree Slam or anything like that, that's still 6 damage counters, and Mega Alakazam can come in for just 1 energy and clean up a knockout on pretty much whatever they have. So I thought it was important to fit at least 2 in this list. And then the other big difference that we have here is that we're playing a whopping 4 Mystery Energy. So the reason we're playing 4 Mystery Energy is Alakazam also has a 2 retreat cost, just like Wobbuffet. So if we start with one of these guys, we really do want to be able to retreat into Trevenant very easily. So, the whole deck is based around Trevenant being your active Pokemon and item locking your opponent. So, the last thing we want is, just a Pokemon clogging up the active spot without a way to retreat it. So Alakazam takes Psychic Energies to attack, and we can retreat it for free. So I thought it would be best to max out Mystery Energy in this list. And typically this would be one of the versions that I would much prefer Sacred Ash, but I think it might be slightly better to play Super Rod in this case, just because we are more reliant on special energy in this type of list. If we play against something like Giratina EX or a fellow, energy disruption version of Trevenant, or something that really punishes special energies, we will have a way to keep recycling our basic energies and use those at least. So I felt Super Odd's utility of getting back energies in addition to Pokemon made it more worthwhile in this type of version that is, more reliant on special energies. And I believe other than that, guys, we obviously fit in 2 Spirit Links. Um, that's everything else is pretty much the same. Well, except for AZ. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So put one Pokemon in your hand, discard all cards attached to that Pokemon. So this is good for several reasons. It'll let us get Pokemon out of the active spot that we don't want. We can reuse Shaymins. But I think most importantly, we can actually reuse Mega Alakazam, or more specifically, Alakazam EX's ability. So we can pick up our Mega Alakazam line and then re-evolve to, take advantage of Alakazam's ability to put some damage counters on the field. So has a lot of synergy in this type of deck. If we start with Wobbuffet, we might not want it in the active spot. If we start with Shaymin, we might want to reuse it. So everything, I think, just benefits from having AZ in this list. And then I forget why, I opted just to max out Sycamore. I think I had an extra spot when building this list, and I figured, hey, a Force Sycamore never hurt anybody. So just trying to get some more consistency in the deck. And that is it, guys. That is the Mega Alakazam version of the deck. And that is all 3 of the Trevenant decks that we're going to show off today. So definitely feel free to try each of these and see which one works for you. I think they all have their own strengths. I think the Burst Balloon version is probably the most consistent out of all of the different versions. You're not reliant on coin flips, and you don't have to fit in another evolution line to make it work as well. So I think it's the most well-rounded out of the bunch. But like I said, Mega Alakazam, it gives you, a lot of options to easily knock out these big EX attackers. And also the energy denial version also helps out with some unfavorable matchups as well. So feel free to try them out. Let us know in the comments below which one you guys like, and which one you prefer, and yeah, you get the idea. But yeah, guys, so that is our first entry into the new Tech It Out video series. Let us know in the comments below also what you think. Hope you guys like this. I'd love to do more of these going forward if it's something that you guys seem receptive to. But that is about it, guys. I appreciate you watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, and don't forget to check out our merch at rarecandytcg.com, and we will see you guys for the next one, okay?